guys, I'm David.
And I'm George.
And today we are joined by our friend Anna Edmonds. Anna is a serial entrepreneur here in the Columbia area, both in the editing world with magazines as well as, several other ventures you've been along to. But we've been talking about having you on the show for a while, so
Yes.
Welcome.
Well, thank you, and I would not call me a serial entrepreneur, I would say an accidental entrepreneur and a reluctant one. I do not like being a business owner, so we'll just put that over there. But thanks for having me.
Cool Guys isn't your average real estate podcast.
Our mission is to give buyers and sellers the power of knowledge through their real estate transactions.
We do this by helping first-time homebuyers realize that there are more expenses that come with owning a home than just the loan.
We also understand there are many times move-up buyers and sellers have forgotten the process because it's been so long since their last real estate transaction.
We make the downsizing easy.
Once you get into the habit of working with us, the process becomes so smooth you won't mind to move.
We are also excited to share with you what all the Midlands has to offer.
This episode is brought to you by Dick Dyer Mercedes-Benz, the first Mercedes-Benz in South Carolina.
Oh, you're very welcome. A lot of people just kind of get into business by accident, right? Because they see a need or they just feel compelled that that's what they want to do. And
I think I invented the head slap. It's like, what did I just do?
What did I get myself into? Why am I doing this?
And how do I get out of this? Will somebody buy this from
What's
me?
your exit plan? Yeah.
You know what? Don't even have a good entry plan, so can't even be thinking about an exit plan. Oh, gosh. All right.
Well, since we're with Exit Realty, we can help you
Okay.
with
Oh,
an
well,
exit.
thank you. Yes, okay.
But yeah, exit means safe passage.
Yes.
That's why they chose that name.
Oh,
for
I
us
need
from.
a good exit. Okay.
Yes. Well, we got to know you first of all in your role as editor-in-chief and CEO of the F-Suite magazine.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about that and how that got started.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'll just say the F-Suite magazine is a magazine for female entrepreneurs and small business owners. And that was my first accidental run into entrepreneurship. I was editing for a lifestyle magazine part-time, and the publisher didn't understand the market. He wasn't local, and I kept trying to improve the magazine and get different advertising wasn't my thing, but I could lead him to advertisers, and he didn't want to hear it. And so finally one day, I think he looked at it as I was bugging him every time, and one time I made another suggestion, and he got exasperated and said, well, if this was your magazine, what would you do? And I said, well, quite frankly, I think, and I didn't even think about it, just blew out of my mouth like most things do. I would turn it into a women's business magazine.
Yeah.
And he laughed at me. Well, here we go. Okay,
Yeah.
so
Now
I
it's
finished
on.
it.
Now
Yeah,
it's on.
that's called a gauntlet. So I picked that up, and I wasn't happy working for him anyway because it was going downhill, and he was annoying. Not because he's a man, but just because he was annoying. And the graphic designer was also very annoyed with him, so I called her up. I said, hey, I'm going to do this. You want to come with me? Not as a partner, but just will you be my graphic designer? She goes, man, let's go. So we did. It took us a year to come up with like a template. I mean, you'd be surprised what all's involved in making a magazine the first time. You got a logo, colors, this, that, fonts. We did that for a year, and we had a prototype, and we did it. I asked that first issue, I had a bunch of writer friends and photographers, and I asked everybody to just donate their services for the first issue, and then I would never not pay them again, ever. And they did. So we had a full issue of articles and photographs and everything, and the designer put it together, and we were off to the races, and that was in 2019. So you can imagine what happened in 2020.
The exciting times of having a magazine.
Yes. So, but we plowed through. I got a little bit of money like everybody else did, and I went into debt, and we plowed through. It was a quarterly magazine, but I will say advertising, especially print advertising, is a hard road to hoe.
Yeah.
People don't really understand it. They think social media is everything, and I tell them it's not. But that's another argument and a conversation for a different day. But that's how magazines survive, is through their advertising and sponsors. So we did that. We've just profiled some amazing women, and we actually focused on specifically female entrepreneurs and small business owners, and that was interesting.
Where was the impetus of the idea for that?
Okay, so originally I just wanted a women's business magazine because Columbia didn't have one. We have business magazines and newspapers, you probably get them in the mail. And we didn't have anything directly for women, and I don't know why I thought of that, because I'm not what I would call an ultra feminist. I mean, a feminist in the most basic definition, I am, but I'm not one of those angry women that, oh, we hate men and they're just, this white male dominance. I don't believe in all that stuff. I don't argue any of that stuff. So anyways, I started doing my due diligence before we got it set up, and I found out that economic hard times are when entrepreneurism rises. Yeah. People need to find a way to make money when they're laid off or get fired or whatever. And women will always find a way to make money because they got to feed those kids. And I'm not saying men don't, but by and large, the women are the ones that have the kids, and those kids are not going hungry, so they will do anything. So they lead in entrepreneurship. And as it turns out that a couple years prior to me doing this, the years that they had stats for, that of course, South Carolina was like one of the worst states during the 2007, 2008-9 economic crisis. Yeah. Us and Michigan, Florida, and I think maybe Arizona, I can't remember. But at that time, we were in the top 5 for entrepreneurship. Oh, wow. We brought ourselves out of that, yes. Mm-hmm. Women were at the top of the heap, of course. And then Columbia had the most female entrepreneurs in the whole state. I was like, oh, I'm onto something here. So I dove in and we made it that magazine. That's how that happened.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, and then when I had the magazine, I was like, oh my gosh, I just started a freaking small business. I am one of these people. Yeah. So in my editor's letters, every issue, I would be able to say, hey, I'm doing this with you. I'm fighting the fight. I have no clue what I'm doing. Yeah. I do ugly cries just like you do at the end of the month. I don't know what's going on. And I made myself very vulnerable and very transparent to them. And I think that worked in my favor. I mean, you've heard me say things at different meetings and stuff. This is hard. It's really hard, but it's important.
It's hard whether you're male or female.
It is.
And there still is, that kind of dichotomy as to how people look at you when you own a business, whether you're male or female, which is, I guess, kind of strange to me because I have 2 daughters, and I look at them going, I want you to be anybody you want to be without any.
But you're a different generation. My father didn't say that to me. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And so you grow up, even though now people say that to me, you have these old voices rotating still in your head, cycling in your head. And there's that, imposter syndrome, and, I didn't go to college till I was, 500 years old. I did that in the last economic downturn. You got a lot of stuff you're dealing with in your head. Yeah. And, women have had a difficult time in general. I did another podcast with somebody where we talked about banking and women and how, women going in to get a loan are asked very different questions and treated very differently usually than a man is when we go in to talk about getting money.
Sure. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
So when you were first starting the magazine, I know you had mentioned briefly on the marketing of it, and you need those advertisers to come in and buy the slots. What was your first idea for going, because you had been in the magazine business, so
as an editor only.
Correct. So you hadn't gone out and done advertisement. So was it you going out, or was it the partner who you brought on?
She was not a partner. She's graphic design.
She just did the graphic design. So you were the only person going out. Yes. Was there a struggle in that process being the entrepreneur there?
Yeah. So almost literally, my first stabs at it were to go in blind, cold call, like, you don't need any advertising, do you? I don't know how to sell anything, even though we all sell ourselves every day. It's not the same as being a professional salesperson. So yeah, it was really, really hard. And luckily, I hang out with good people like you. You're not my only friend. There's other people who will mentor me. The guy who did my website has been a small business owner for a long time, and he has to sell his services. I would just talk to people and get my confidence built up. You read books or whatever. I'm still not what I would call a competent salesperson. I struggle to this day. I need a salesperson because that's not my strength, because it takes more than talking to people. I can build relationships. I have one with you, and we've never done business together. But if I had a good salesperson, they could build me a program, you know, where this month we're doing this, and I don't know how to do those things.
Sure.
I just, you know, numbers are not my thing. I tell people I'm allergic to numbers. I just, you know, that's another failing of mine that has probably gotten me into trouble, that I'm just not a financial person. I'm a creative.
Sure.
And the product's there though, so the product's amazing. That kind of helps with the advertising part.
It
If you're
is
not,
amazing.
Yeah.
But this one doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
I quit publishing this, actually.
You know, and that makes my heart heavy
Why?
because I would give these to my girls
What'd they say?
and just say, look, I mean, look at the examples you have of.
Well, you should
of
have
young
advertised. I
women
could have
who do
used
that.
the money. Did they ever give you any feedback on it? They're young, I know.
Just they're young, I
Yeah.
mean, but it's just, I think it was encouraging to them to see that, you know, it doesn't matter who you are, what
it's
your
more a
sex is.
consistent
Yeah.
example.
Well, you know,
not the example.
Before it was even published, I was working with the SBDC, the Small Business, whatever, Development, whatever it is,
Yeah.
of South Carolina. And the advisor I was talking to was a black man in his 50s. Some people may know him, he's maybe 40s, Alan Brown.
Okay.
And he had never seen the magazine. Actually, we did have one out. He was new, and we had 1 or 2 issues out, and we were looking to grow it. And he looked at this, and he was just like fascinated. And he goes, "Oh my gosh," he goes, "this is the magazine I want my daughters to read." Because he saw that we had all different color women, you know, from all walks of life. I broke all barriers and put a man on the cover. Because to prove that men are cool. We can learn from men, we can work with men. I love men. Where would we be if we didn't have them? It takes two to, you know, make the world go round, a man and a woman. So, yeah, it's a good magazine, but I needed to stop because it wasn't really, there's different reasons. It wasn't a financial reason. I just had a different idea that I needed to pursue, and that's where I am now. So thank you for telling me that you guys like the magazine.
Oh, absolutely.
If they didn't get a copy of one of these, they can have one, your daughters.
Well, and because like with us, it raised the issue of the world of real estate and women,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Because you talked about your experiences buying and selling homes
Yes.
as a single woman with
Yes.
kids,
Yes.
and you know the challenges there. And I think sometimes I don't know how many like young professional females that we've had like approached us, young girls, you know, in their early 20s, go, "Hey, I want to buy my own house. You know, I'm ready." It's more younger guys, or they're older females. You know, maybe they're divorced or something like that, and then you know they've been through it. But you know, a lot of young women don't think about buying their own home.
I did not when I was young and single. I had a good job, and I was renting an apartment, and I look back in time, and I'm like, it never occurred to you to even consider buying a home and
Yes.
establishing it, because I didn't get married till I was like 28. I had plenty of time to buy a home if I
Yeah.
wanted to. But it wasn't, I guess my dad and mom, I mean, my mom was your typical housewife. She's not thinking in that, you know what I mean? Dad ran the business of the family. And I look back and I'm like, gosh, I could have owned a home.
Yeah.
That's so weird.
So what do you tell somebody like George and I that are real estate agents from your perspective of
Yeah.
encouraging that or cultivating that or you
Well,
know?
I don't know about that in specific. I only have 2 experiences, personal experiences in buying homes.
Yeah.
And the first one was when I did get married and we moved to South Carolina. And I had no experience. And again, we already had kids. He brought 2 kids into the marriage, and I was pregnant. So you can imagine where my head's at, and we're trying to find a home. And he had purchased a home in the past, so he knew what he was doing, and he's also very numbers oriented.
Yeah.
So I took a very passive role. All I cared about was the house.
Yeah.
I didn't
Like it?
care.
Yeah.
I hated it, actually. But he had vision. We can do this. He's in the construction industry.
Yeah.
He's now my ex-husband, but I mean, at the time, I had to trust him, which is part of the problem. I trusted him with all the who are we gonna get to do the mortgage, you know, blah, blah, blah. I was not in on any of that. I was just there to sign the papers.
Yeah.
Did it go bad? No. It was fine, and we lived in that house for many years, and till we got divorced. But it was this, when I look back, I'm like, you weren't involved in that at all.
You weren't able to learn the way you needed to learn. for the
I
next
didn't let
transaction.
myself, I didn't want to learn, and I think that there's a lot of people, but women in particular, that were very happy to let our husbands do the hard work in areas that we don't want to go. Like, we never discussed insurance. He just bought the life insurance, and then he just did all that. And you know, his 401k, you know, we never discussed that until they had to give me half of it. And then do you know what I mean? Women tend to take a passive role, and I'm not saying all women, and I think your daughter's generation is probably different, and even maybe the generation in between. There's you know, people that aren't your age and aren't their age, is that your generation, that they're getting smarter. But we know as a fact that women have been put on the back burner of anything mathematical.
Yeah.
We know that, and I can trace back to where it happened to me in high school, and I'm not going to get into that, but the teachers just truly catered to the boys. I can see that now. I have clear memories, and that's because I used to love math until I hit high school and I had these teachers that just didn't care about us. And once you get lost in math, you're lost forever. I mean, you have to build on that. You have to, right?
Yeah.
So I just would avoid all things math, and to me, buying a house involves a lot of math. It's not math per se, it's not algebra, you gotta talk about numbers. And I don't, you know, there's a force field I've put up. So that was my first experience. So I don't know if that helps, but I have a feeling that there's a lot of women out there still like that, just let their husbands, the husbands take out the trash, the husbands do the yard work, the husbands buy the house. I mean, that's
Not
a general
necessarily taking the
attitude.
front role on it, but being a
partner.
A partner.
Yeah, being more of a
Going
partner and
together
asking the questions, yes.
and learning.
And that shows up later in life when it's time to talk to like a financial advisor about planning for the future and retirement. I can't tell you how many of my girlfriends are like, my husband's making me go talk to the financial advisor with him today. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to talk about it. How sad is that?
I don't think even as guys sometimes you want to talk about it because
No,
it's
but
a
I think
reality.
men,
check.
because they've been in my generation, the men have been working and do talk about it when they're setting up their benefits and everything, and women are just along for the ride, you know. So that was my first experience buying a house. And so we got divorced, and I didn't want to live in that house any longer, and we sold it, and I had to buy a new one. And I didn't know what I was doing, and I was desperate. Not desperate in timing or anything, but I just wanted out of that house, and I knew what I wanted. I mean, I had very clear goals in my head, what I wanted and where I wanted to be. So fortunately, I did find a good realtor. It was a woman. I did have men trying to sell our old house. The two male realtors we had trying to sell our house, I didn't like them at all. I felt like they
And it wasn't us.
No, it wasn't. This was years ago. And it wasn't because they were men, but I didn't have a good experience with them. But the woman who sold us that house,
Sure.
I was very comfortable with, and now I have a new realtor I'm working with on this new house, so I was comfortable with her. And again, I didn't really know what I was doing.
Yeah.
I knew that there was, like the realtor said, well, there's an inspection and there's this, and you need to get a mortgage person and everything. So there was an older fellow in my church who worked for Bank of America, and I just went up to him one day and I said, I'm buying a house and I need a banker, I need a loan. And this was like, I want to say, when did the real estate bubble burst? In 2008,
2009.
So this was right before all that, and everybody was getting a house and on those balloon payments.
Yeah.
And all I remember him saying to me was, Anna, here's what we can give you. He says, and I will not allow you to take a balloon payment loan.
Sure.
And I wasn't sure exactly what that meant, but I trusted him so much because he was old enough to be my dad, and he was very kindly, and he went to church with me, so that made it good. And so I got a really good loan from him. But if I hadn't had him, I would have gone to a stranger, and maybe they would have given me balloon payments. I don't know, and I would have been in huge huge trouble,
Mhm.
huge trouble. So I got in the house and I realized, you know what, there's things about this house I should have pointed out that I
Yeah.
shouldn't have been, because I was so desperate to get out of that other house
Yeah,
and so hungry to me in my own little house that I bought, that I should have demanded at the very least that the carpets be cleaned, if
Yeah.
not replaced, because they did have dogs and young children. And I was miserable for a while with those carpets. And the kitchen floor, I think, was the original kitchen floor in the
Yeah.
house at the time. I was 13 years old, and again, animals. So there's like, I would have liked to have seen my realtor point those things out to me before I, put a contract on the house.
Yeah.
We should have dickered back
Sat
and
down and
forth.
talked.
Yeah, she should have pointed those things out to me.
yeah. Well, sometimes it can be challenging with people finding out what their level of, what their level of push is in terms of doing stuff like that.
Right.
Because, it's in your role as an advisor, it's tricky because you don't want to advise people to buy something that they don't need
Right.
or can't afford, but you also, you're trying to balance, how much money do they have to do these kind of things, so that, you're not walking them into a scenario where they get into the house and all of a sudden that's all they can afford. They can't afford to do anything else.
So actually, right before COVID, I was looking to move down to the avenues of Casey.
Yeah,
Because that was a hot ticket. I knew what was coming, that everybody's going there.
Still
So
is.
I had a friend take me into one of these homes in the avenues, and those houses are built, 1950s, 60s in there? And this house had not been renovated at all, had a big, beautiful yard, and they had actually done some changes, put some walls in weird done something,
Yeah.
and the kitchen needed gutted. It was the original everything in the kitchen. So I looked around and the meat and potatoes were good, but oh my gosh. So I said to the realtor, I can afford this house, but I'm not moving in it.
Yeah.
Like, I can't, and I can't afford to fix it up. And he said, well, this is your only chance, this, in your budget, I know you can get this house, but if you wait, you're not gonna be able to, because it's gonna go. Then COVID hit, and I'm like, I'm not going anywhere. I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that same house sold for almost double what they were asking at the time. It was crazy.
well, buying a house and then getting into a house and remodeling it are two different things. That's
Even just making it livable, just to put all new appliances and cabinets in the kitchen was, I couldn't live like that. It was
Yeah.
horrible.
And there's even now a big difference between pre-COVID and post-COVID renovations.
Oh, really?
Not even the home sale process, but pre-COVID, you're able to get your supplies a lot
Yes,
faster.
yes.
Everything's coming in.
Right,
And now when you're trying to do the renovation, the contractors are all double booked.
right. They don't need
The
business.
supplies
they're
aren't
busy.
even coming in, and you're kind of stuck playing a little bit of a waiting
Yes,
game.
yes.
And that hurts people even more.
A waiting game with no end zone.
Correct,
Right? And
yes.
you're not
You're
gonna
just-
do a date.
You're in the
Right.
waiting room.
Right. I just
Yeah.
got, my kids bought me a brand new kitchen faucet for Mother's Day, which sounds really weird, but I love it. It's with the tall one with the hose and motion sensor.
Yeah.
I don't know when I'm gonna get it installed, So I just go look at it.
Every song you remind
It's laying
yourself
on
you
the
have.
floor in the back bedroom,
Yeah.
like, I'm still here.
No,